All right.
Huh. I'll talk a little bit about public transportation around here, which is virtually non-existent. That is, it's quite terrible. Um, my own family is from India. They arrived in Stanford in July of 2005, and I had not owned a car for 10 years. They didn't own a car. My wife had a scooty in India, but when they came here, they very quickly wanted a car because public transportation in the city of Stanford, in the county of Fairfield, and in Connecticut in general, and in the U.S. in general, is vastly inferior to public transportation in India. Now, you gotta appreciate the difference in wealth to realize what that means. In India has a per capita income of about $700 per person, and the U.S. per capita income is $41,000. So how come India has better public transportation than we have? Now, the fundamental answer to that question is we used to have very good public transportation. When my mother was young and in college, back in the early 30s, she could get on a trolley in New York City, and she could take trolleys from New York to Chicago. They were all run by counties, and so you took the trolley of the county to the border of the next county, and then you switched trolleys, and you went through the next county's trolley. You could go all the way from New York to Chicago by light rail. What happened was that from the 1940s to the 1960s, all of that transportation network was bought up by Detroit. That's the three major auto companies bought it up. And first they ripped up the trolley tracks, except in a very few places like Philadelphia, where for a long time the city would not allow it. And they replaced the trolleys with buses, and then they'd phase out the buses. And meanwhile, they would build suburbs. Suburbs really started growing just after World War II because of the GI Bill. And suddenly, the GIs, 13 million of them returning from World War II, were able to purchase their own homes on mortgages that were financed by the federal government. And so now, well over 50% of the housing in the U.S. is in suburbs, and it's all entirely dependent on automobiles, which is to the great pleasure of the gasoline companies and the car companies. And it was absolutely intentional that there should be no public transportation in that, so that everyone would have to buy a car. Now, we have really destroyed enormous common property by doing this. In any European country, in Japan, in any other developed country, it is far easier to get around than it is to get around here, and far cheaper. Which is the primary reason that the U.S. Carbon footprint is more than twice the size per capita of any other developed country. We are the most wasteful country on earth because we squander our money and resources and the world's resources, and for that matter all the energy such that we get from countries like Saudi Arabia and Iraq, on things that we don't need to be wasting it on in the first place. If we had used public transportation and had good insulation in houses and so on, and used low energy lighting, so on, we could cut 90% of the energy that we waste. This would be enormously beneficial to us politically, because we would then be independent of other people's resources, and we wouldn't have to worry about Middle Eastern oil the way that we do now. Although much of our worry about that is not primarily about our own oil, it's our desire to control the rest of the world by controlling the world's energy supply. So There's all, and of course there's an enormous amount of greed involved in it, since all the oil companies are making record profits at the same time that of course they're blaming it all on the Arabs. Uh, but we would be in a far better international position if we were to do this, in any case, and we might actually live through the century if we did it. On top of that, we could be happier, because instead of wasting all of our resources on making sure that each and every person has one of everything, we could share a little and get to learn about each other and respect each other a little bit, and share our problems and help each other out and be happier and better people for it.